how diverse are Indians? What is the human diversity in the Indian population? India is a subcontinent, and there has been migration of population from many directions, from Africa, from the north, also across the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. And to explain to us what the human diversity is, I have with me Dr. K. Thangaraj, one of India's best known experts on human genetics, human diversity, and the implications on what this diversity does for diseases and on what happens thanks to the caste system. Dr. Thangaraj is the director of the Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, a very important lab, better known for all its jurisprudence along paternity, maternity, and police cases for DNA fingerprinting, which is also a technique which was pioneered by him and his colleagues. But today, in this particular segment, we speak about Indian genetic diversity, and not plant, not animals, but humans. Thanks a lot, Dr. Thangaraj. Always a delight speaking to you. Let's start simply, and this is a simple conversation we are having. How diverse is the Indian human population?
Thank you, Pallav, for visiting us and having much more interest in understanding the human diversity in India and taking to the common people. If you talk about diversity in India, you may wonder to know that in India we have more than 4,600 population groups which are well defined anthropologically.
Now, 4,600 means what? For a lay person, that doesn't mean anything. But how diverse is it? Do we have mixtures from different parts of the world? What happens? Tell me exhaustively. This is your domain experience, boss.
Sure. Thank you for that. If you say the number 4,600 population which varies within the population groups, it could be a caste, it could be a religious, it could be a linguistic groups. If you broadly look at the diversity in India, we can take many aspects. So one of the stratification in India is the language. We have 4 major linguistic groups: Dravidians, Indo-Europeans, Austroasiatic, and Tibeto-Burman. Again, under each linguistic group, there are several languages. For example, if you take Dravidian, we have Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu. Similarly, if you take Indo-European, there are several languages. Austroasiatic, several languages. Tibeto-Burman, several languages. In addition to that, there are several isolated languages like Andamanese, Nihalis, and there are few more. Again, under each language, if you take Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu in south, again we have social structures, so-called caste system. We have so-called upper caste, so-called middle caste, so-called lower caste, so-called tribes, right? So that makes India is one of the complex nation in terms of diversity. And the diversity, if you understand why this diversity came into existence, then we have to go back and look at when the first population or first set of people who have migrated here and populated. And if you go back, it's interesting to see, it's also well-known fact that the modern human originated in Africa about 200,000 years back. Then they started migrating out of Africa. There could be many reasons why they have migrated out of Africa, maybe in search of food. And one interesting theory which was actually published in a scientific magazine, not by biologist or geneticist, by geologist. They found that one of the big lake called Malawi, the water level has gone down to 95%. That was between 35,000 to 70,000 years ago. Therefore, it's very dried and people might not have got enough water. And that's one of the reasons probably the population started migrating out of Africa. Then it's also interesting to know that the first set of people who migrated out of Africa is in Indian subcontinent.
It is in India.
Yes.
So meaning out of Africa to India.
India, yes. And the first set of people who migrated out of Africa are none other than the Andaman tribes. In Andaman and Nicobar Islands, there are 572 islands, and there are 6 tribal groups presently. 4 of them typically look like Africans: Onge, Jarawa, Great Andamanis, and Sentinelese. 2 of them typically look like Southeast Asian group, like Chinese, Malays, and so on. The Andamanese group, the 4 groups, even today, they appear typically like African features. But it's again interesting to study their genetics. We studied their genetics maybe a couple of decades ago using genetic markers. Particularly, we used the mitochondrial DNA markers, which we all inherit maternally. So we wanted to trace the maternal lineage of them. And it appears that the Andamanis are the first modern human who migrated out of Africa, taking southern coastal route and reached Andaman and Nicobar Islands about 65,000 to 70,000 years back. Because we don't have any other population in the world having a unique set of mutations which are present in Andaman tribes. And we estimated the age based on the mutation, and we arrived that probably they are the first modern human who migrated out of Africa about 65,000 to 70,000 years back.
And do we still find these ancient humans from where the first migrations happened in Africa, or that lineage is lost in Africa?
So that initial set of mutation, we don't find, the initial set of mutation we find in between, because the divergent period from Africa to here, it was maybe about 1 lakh year back. By the time they reached, it was 70,000 years back. But during the last 70,000 years, they are in isolation. And our DNA naturally mutate. And since last 70,000 years, they have accumulated the mutation, so that makes them unique. And also they have not admixed with any population. Therefore, they are preserving their pure genotype, that means genetic information, and the phenotype, like the African phenotype. Whereas, I'll tell you that what happened further. Further, some group stayed, some group migrated towards Australia. So that means Australian Aboriginals, Andamanis, are of the same set of
Stock.
Same stock who started migrating out of Africa. And in this process, they didn't go straight to Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Some groups stayed in southern part of India. That's why even the phenotypically, some of the groups, particularly in Kerala, if you look at, like Kurumba, they typically look like similar features, right? Then you may say that why only Andamanis are typically having the features like Africans, what happened to others if they are the same stock? Then what happened after this divergence? Some stayed in southern part of India and others migrated to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, further to Australia. These population gave rise to many population groups. And we call them, those who are settled for the first time in South, we call them as ancestral South Indians, right? And there was several groups emerged from there. Then there was a second wave of migration from Africa. People started migrating towards Europe. Somewhere in the Middle East, there was again divergence of groups. One group has gone to Europe, other group has come to India through the Middle East, whom we call as ancestral North Indians. So then they also started diverging from there. And some point of time, we estimated that during the last 2,000 to 4,000 years, so these two groups have admixed, ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indians. Now if you look at the phenotype of the people, and the color is one phenotype, you can take it. The dark color and the light color, if you see two extreme conditions, extreme north and extreme south, you have dark and light skin color. And they have admixed in such a way that some of them have changed their color, because that's all based on how much of admixture they had with the other group. And India is the only country where you can see gradient of colors, right? Extreme dark, extreme light, and in between we see all the colors.
All the brown color, light
Yes.
brown, dark brown.
Yes,
all of them.
everything. So,
Wheat color. You are different, I am different, we are different colors.
Absolutely.
But we are still Indians.
still Indians. So that is what is giving absolute phenotypic features. Anybody can just look at the color and say that, oh, we are all admixed. But although then further what happened? After admixing, the last 2,000 years, every single population started maintaining the endogamy, means marrying within the group. There was two founding group, and they gave rise to many population groups. There was an admixture. Then again everybody maintaining the endogamy, marrying within the group. So this happened much before the caste system came into existence. So now if you look at Indians, you can see if you use genetic markers, like we used 1 million genetic markers, and you can see every group is uniquely clustering, but that cluster also like a kind of gradient way. So what it says is that India is not inhabited by a single large group, whereas we can say that India is inhabited by large number of small groups. Although every group is unique, but each group has some kind of affinities with the other groups. You can see gradient. I can show you the picture, you can capture that. So that tells we are all related, we are all Indians, but the uniqueness of every population is because of the endogamy marriage which we are practicing for the last 2,000 years.
Fascinating. Let's dwell a little bit on the tribes of the Andaman Nicobar, then we'll come back and talk about what is happening in the mainland. The tribes in the Andaman Nicobar, and at least two of those tribes have still maintained their lifestyle and their tribal nature of not mixing with others, the Jarawas and the Sentinelese. So does that offer us what could be very close to what human ancestry is?
Now, if you look at the genetically, if you compare the genetic information of these two populations who are preserving their genetic information with Africans, because of the divergence period is very long, they may not fall close affinities with the Africans, because of the distance between these two groups are very long time. But otherwise, they exactly have the phenotype, the dark skin color, curly hair, a little bit short stature. All of these are of the African phenotype.
So their DNA, their genome, their genetic sequence is unique.
Yes, absolutely. It's unique. Although they diverged from Africa, because they are in isolation for a very long time and they acquired their mutation, unique set of mutation, it makes them unique. But you can trace back to Africa, because the initial markers which diverged can be found in both Africans and the Andamanese.
So both the Jarawas and the Sentinelese, which maintain their almost kind of an independent existence from what sometimes you and I call modern
Yes.
societies.
Right.
And that is what makes their genetics unique. So should we be doing something to gather that genetic information from at least these two tribes? Centennially is very hard. India is a country of 1.4 billion, but we still let our tribes live a life in their own fashion, which is fascinating. Australians and the Americans did not do that. But as a geneticist, as a human diversity person, do you think something should be done to preserve the DNA and the cells of especially the Andamanis, the Jarawas and the Sentinelese?
It's very, very important. Not only Jarvas and Sentinelese, even Onge, they are maintaining their endogamy still. Only the Great Andamanis have admixed with the mainland people. It is very important to have their cell lines, to test various hypotheses, to understand how their genome is reacting to any pathogens, and many more questions can be asked. So that can be done only with the help of the local government or Indian government. If there is a permission, we will be absolutely happy to create their cell line and preserve it.
Your former institute, the Center for Cellular Molecular Biology, did try to get the DNA and the cell lines. What happened to that?
So we got the DNA and we studied. You are well aware of that study which we published in 2005 in Science, which some time ago described that is the one which gave the information that they're the first modern human who migrated out of Africa. In the same time, when we traveled from here, myself, Dr. Lalji Singh and some of my colleagues, along with the Regional Medical Center in Port Blair, as one of the ICMR institutes, we collected sample and we made a cell line there. But unfortunately, because of the conditions where the power cut is very, very frequent, and they could not maintain the cell line. So that's a sad part of it.
Meaning you could not make those immortal cell lines where you would have the cell lines preserved for long periods of time in vitro conditions. Do you think it's a good idea to do it now?
Yes, it is absolutely a good idea to do it now. It again takes time, and with the help of the RMRC Port Blair, because they have a well set up laboratory to create immortalized cell line, and of course we need to get the permission from both Indian government and the local government. Once we get, it's absolutely.
But scientifically, it is a good thing to do.
Absolutely, it's a good thing to do, because one is that not only to preserve their cell line, and also one can test many hypotheses. So how their cells are reacting to the pathogens, and many aspects can be studied once we have the cell line. And of course we can grow and extract as much DNA is necessary for subsequent genetic studies. And many more things can be done.
Yeah. Compared to many other countries, like I said, America and especially Australia, who kind of shot down all their aboriginals, at least India has given them the due respect and place, yes, and given them the place to live in a lifestyle they have wanted. Within that, scientists like you can definitely help in understanding what the out of Africa modern humans looked if we get hold of the DNA. And I'm sure if you put in a proposal, maybe the government can consider, the new government is very keen on understanding many different aspects of science. Let's come back from Andaman and Nicobar. Let's come to the mainland. And you spoke about two original migratory populations, one from the north and one from the south, and an admixture in that. How long ago did these two mix with each other?
Yeah, this admixture took place about 2000 years. last 2 to 4,000 years, this admixture took place. But after that, the endogamy marriage has been practiced for last 2,000 years. Probably the caste system which came into existence around 1,000 or 1,500 years must have put more pressure to very strictly follow the endogamy. And importantly, following endogamy has a lot more health-related issues. Particularly when we studied about 300 different populations, not only within India and also South Asian countries, we found at least 1/3 of the population. We predicted there could be a population-specific mutation that may lead to population-specific rare diseases. So 1/3 is quite high. When you talk about rare disease, elsewhere, it's very rare. Even in India, if you look at broadly in India, it's still rare. But if you go to a particular population, rare disease is very, very common. That's all because of the practice of endogamy for the last 2,000 years.
No, we'll come to the rare diseases part a little later. We have a sufficient amount of time to discuss that. Let me talk about this migration which came from the north. Many people say that is the Aryan invasion into India. What do you subscribe?
So we don't see any distinct population typically showing a very unique cluster to suggest that this is the population which came to India separately where we can name them as an Aryan. We don't see anything like that. But whereas the other studies shows that there was always a migration pattern. One of the studies showed that there was a migration about 1000 to 2000 BCE. They're all very recent ones. Even there was a migration of Siddhis, very minimally.
We see them in Gujarat.
We see them in Gujarat. We see them in Karnataka. We also see them in Hyderabad. Then there is a Parsis, then Jewish populations, and even from here, the European Romas. So they have gone from India to the European countries. So this migration is always there. They're all very recent migration. So what we are talking is the initial set of people who have migrated to India. So the ancient migration which happened, which gave rise to ancestral South Indian and ancestral North Indians. But the recent migration, we don't consider that they contributed significantly to the present day Indian populations.
So meaning the theory of this Aryan invasion and the fair-skinned population is not very correct, whereas we had migration coming in much earlier. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we don't call as an Aryan migration because we demolished that Aryan migration theory here. So we cannot actually tell that there was a large inflow of population which well spread across India. So to tell that there is an Aryan migration which has changed the populations of Indian subcontinent. So that we cannot actually say. Of course, there was a small group of migration. Several times it happened. Some of the examples which I told. So we cannot really consider that as a major Aryan migration which changed the...
No, there's the tribe in Jammu and Kashmir, and especially in the Ladakh region, which is spoken of as the pure Aryan stock. You've looked at that. What is your feeling on that?
So which population is that?
This is near Kishtwar, where you have, which is considered the original Aryan population still.
There's no original Aryan because we don't see any population distinctly clustering which is not connecting with any other Indian population. All these populations which you analyzed, all are having kind of gradient of clusters suggesting that they are part of India. There's a mixing of the genome with almost all the population.
Now, for human genetic diversity, whenever we speak, we can't ignore the caste system which was developed. Well, caste system had its own merits and demerits. In the past, there were probably some merits in having that. Today, we don't consider that as meritorious. Let's not go into the merits or demerits of it. But it certainly had an impact on the human genetic diversity. So, how did caste system impact the Indian human genetic diversity?
In fact, the caste system is the one which helps people to marry within the group. When we follow such endogamy marriage, means that you are limiting the gene flow between two different groups. So naturally in our genome tend to mutate. Different part of the genome has a different mutation rate. When two individuals living in the same environment, same village, for example, living the major city in the same village, two different caste or tribe, whatever is, living for thousands of years. Within the same village, they go to the same field, they take water from the same well, drink, everything is happening. But when it comes to the marriage, they are two different, distinct groups. So, in the same place, they live for thousands of years. They live as a two independent population. That means marrying within the group two of this population. That makes each of this population very unique because they acquired unique set of mutations. Each one acquired unique set of mutation. That's what makes them very unique.
So they live together, but within the same village or within the same settlement, you can have distinct genetic diversity within the same village population. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, absolutely. Because just example, we are taking two. Even there are some 10 different population. Let's take as a caste or tribe. They marry within the group for several generations or several hundreds or thousands of years. Makes every population unique because every population acquired unique set of mutation. When you use genetic markers, each one has a different set of mutation, then we can actually genetically we can differentiate all of these populations.
So is it good or bad?
In a way, it's bad because when we talk about bad aspect of this endogamy, means if there is a mutation, we have
It gets amplified.
approximately 30,000 genes, for example. So if the mutation in our genome, there's only 1.5 to 2% of the genome is responsible for making protein. That's called as coding region. The rest of them are non-coding region. If the mutation happens in the non-coding region, 98%, most it doesn't affect the phenotypes, that's fine. If the mutation happens in the coding region, it's going to affect the individual, depending upon where exactly that mutation is. So that causes the disease. Again, when we talk about disease, there are two kinds of diseases. One is dominant, other one is recessive. We have 46 chromosomes. 23 we inherit from father, 23 from the mother. When you talk about dominant disease, that means the chromosome set 23 pairs or 46 chromosome. 23, if you take chromosome 1, there are 2 chromosome 1. Similarly, there are 2 chromosome 2. One comes from father, one from the mother. If the mutation is in one of the pairs, if it causes the disease, it's a dominant because 1 out of 2 has the mutation, so it has a dominant effect, the individual get the disease. If it is a recessive, then one chromosome carrying the mutation, other one is normal, the individual will be absolutely fine. And the effect can be seen only both the chromosomes are having the same mutation. It causes the disease called as recessive disease. Considering the fact that the population practice endogamy, if there is a mutation arose in one of the chromosomes, consider that's a recessive mutation. That individual will be absolutely fine, there's no problem at all, because it's a recessive mutation. Then he or she carry the mutation, is passing on to the next generation. For example, those days there'll be 4 or 5 children. So considering fact, statistically maybe there is 50% of chance that that mutation goes to the next generation. 3 out of 6 carry that mutation. All the 3 will be absolutely fine, because it's a recessive mutation, only one chromosome is carrying. Similarly, it's going to increase its frequency in the population. But again, considering the fact that most of the populations marrying within the community, there's a chance after several generations, after the mutation well spread across the population, within the population, there's a 2 individual with the mutation who are absolutely fine. I can show you some of the examples. Who are absolutely fine, but they marry, and there is a 25% of chance that both father and mother contribute the abnormal chromosome to the next generation. When it comes, one from the father, another from the mother, now it's a homozygous mutation. Both the chromosome carry the mutation. Therefore, there's a disease. So that's the impact, what we are seeing now, why the recessive disease or the population-specific disease is quite high in India is because of this.
Now, you mentioned, and this is about rare diseases and genetic diseases which come through either a recessive gene or a dominant gene and the admixture from that. But look at the flip side. When you have marriages happening within the same community or caste or whatever, there is also a certain selection pressure for people who are more adapted to that region. Have you seen that?
That is, anyways, there's nothing to do with adaptation. As we discussed about one particular region, there are 5 or 10 communities. When we talk about adaptation, so all the 5 communities will have the same effect of adaptation. For example, like sickle cell. And if you go to Chhattisgarh, it's quite common. Not only one of the tribe has that, but there are many tribes have the sickle cell trait. That's because of adaptation. People adapt to that environment.
Yeah, but sickle cell also gave you the selection pressure to avoid malaria.
Absolutely.
So there was a certain benefit
Yes.
of that particular mutation.
Correct.
At a time when malaria was very prevalent. Now malaria is going down, so we are finding solutions for that. But in the same fashion, have you found for other areas where this same community marriages or same caste marriages have kind of resulted in a certain positive benefit, one may say?
Positive benefit is not because of the endogamy, it's because of the environmental influence, which just talked
Yes.
about the sickle cell. So not that one population, that many population within that region, because of the high pressure of malarial parasite, there's a sickle cell. So these two are two different altogether. So that is required for that particular environment. Therefore, there's a pressure which builds in the system. Therefore, there's a mutation arise. So these two we have to look at differently.
Sure. One, there is an external pressure which is thanks to a particular disease, and the other is due to the endogamous marriages, which is a more passive way of doing that. Now, within this, what is your general feeling? And I'm asking a very, very general question. India has lived with caste system for how long? And it has changed the genetic diversity. And what is happening now?
Now things are changing. So we ourselves see that the endogamy, although most of the populations are practicing, but it's getting little dilution now. Those who know the impact of the endogamy are now coming out of that. So that's for better. Yeah, you asked the question earlier whether the endogamy is good or bad. On the other side, if you look at the diversity is very, very essential, not only to human, even if you look at any animal. the animals which are with kind of the endogamous nature, what we see among human, that doesn't show a much better phenotype. So always the diversity gives them much better phenotype in many ways.
Now, when you speak about endogamous marriages, especially in North India, and I'm sure you looked at this carefully, see, there is the Gotra. Gotra is the least on the scale of communities and caste, which is really at the lowest level, meaning lowest and highest, not meaning by way of value, but it is the closest of communities. And normally, especially in North India, marriages within the Gotra are not permitted. So is that marriage within the Gotra is not permitted? Is it because somebody in the ancient Indian tradition understood that if you marry within the Gotra, you will accumulate genes which can be disease causing?
Absolutely. I think one can think about different Indian way of medicine, like for example, Ayurveda. We don't know much, but I don't know how long they took the time to understand such system in Ayurveda. Similarly, our forefathers must have understood the impact of the endogamy. Therefore, they avoided marrying within the close relatives. That is one way of avoiding the recessive diseases. I think that's good thing which happened. That's the reason we don't see too much of diseases in North compared to South, where the endogamy and consanguinity is quite high.
Yes. Marriages of cousins is far more common in South India, and also in the Muslim population it is very common, whereas in North India it may not be common. But these are very complex things, and we can't generalize and say about specific communities. Let's look at step back again in time and look at the Indus Valley civilization. Now, that civilization which evolved there, what was the kind of genetic structure of the people who inhabited the Indus Valley civilization? And we'll come to Rakhi Gadi and the Sindhu linkage to that a little later. First, tell me a little bit about, in your understanding, what was the kind of humans who inhabited the Indus Valley civilization?
That's fortunate for us to recently analyze the complete genome of one skeleton, and otherwise there was a lot of excavation by our archaeologist colleagues from different part of the country, and they found recently one intact skeleton, and that gave us clue that again that particular sample has admixed genetically. When we looked at that
and this is the skeleton at Rakhi Gadi in Haryana?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So that gives that part of it is of our ancient Indian genome. That's a Andamanese genome, and majority of that consisting of Iranian hunter-gatherers, not Iranian farmers, but Iranian hunter-gatherers. The sample itself is approximately 300 BCE, whereas the admixed part of Iranian hunter-gatherer is of more than 10,000 years. So that, to understand the genome of Rakhi Gadi is one. It also has another important features to get to know that the agriculture, which we all believed that it must have come from Iran, a place called Fertile Crescent, during the Neolithic period or much later. But this suggests that they are not Iranian farmers, but they are an hunter-gatherer. That means the agriculture must have started in India independently. So that's another clue that tells us.
So fascinating. See the skeleton. I think it was a woman's skeleton in Rakhigarhi in Haryana, which was done alongside with Deccan College, and some fine research papers came out of that. That suggests that one, you suggested that there was human migration out of Africa and the modern human to India and especially to the Andaman Nicobar Islands. The second thing which you're telling me, which is important, is that when people say that agriculture evolved in the Fertile Crescent in Iran, Iraq, it also evolved independently in India. Is that the assertion?
Yes. So that was the prediction. We are not confirming that, but because of the genome is much older than the agriculture period of about 10,000 years, it is much older than that, we presume that agriculture must have started by our forefathers much before this agriculture came from Iran.
So both places it happened probably independently?
Yes, that's what is the prediction. It must have happened independently.
How do we confirm it?
That's what. We don't have any clue to confirm, but this is a prediction. But of course, subsequent studies might help us in identifying or confirming that it must have happened independently.
Now, see, there is much discussion. No longer is it called Indus Valley civilization. Now it's called the Sindhu Saraswati civilization. How did that happen? And did Rakhigarhi's excavation play a role in that? And you were involved deeply in that.
Yeah, I deeply involved in genetics, but not archaeologically, because that was, as you said, it was initially done by Deccan College, particularly Professor Vasant Shinde and his group. So that part I'm not very, very familiar with.
You're fair enough. I mean, you're saying you don't want to indulge in the semantics of Sindhu Saraswati civilization versus Indus Valley. I can understand. You're a geneticist and a human geneticist. Today, when you look at the human population, is it mixing more? Is the variability being lost? What is happening in India in the 21st century?
In the recent past, there's a little bit of dilution of endogamy. That's good part genetically in terms of the disease aspect, because that helps in avoiding some of the population-specific recessive diseases. I hope that subsequent generations, which would follow more of exogamy than endogamy, for the healthy future, right? But on the other side, but I don't know how good it is to lose the identity of every human population in India.
Meaning the unique identities which we have of small regions, small settlements, small castes, which have unique identities. I also sometimes wonder what would happen in times to come. Now, a Tamilian is marrying a Punjabi, and a Manipuri is marrying a Gujarati, and the admixture which is happening is very diverse. More recently, see, there is a lot of pressure on humans thanks to climate change. Are we likely to see any impact on human genetic diversity because of global warming and climate change? It's recent, I know you don't probably look at this, but maybe, I don't know if you can speak.
Yeah, for genetics, actually it takes thousands of years to see anything on our genome. There are few examples because of the if you look at the evolution of modern human in general, it is predicted for the last 10,000 years after industrialization, the mutation rate has increased ever before. That we have seen in some of the genes. For example, the skin color mutation. Obviously, when you say that everybody originated from Africa, why there are different skin color? As because of the evolutionary pressure. People who try to go towards Europe, and because of the high melanin content in the skin, they might have faced a lot of issues with the vitamin D deficiency. Because in the Europe, even today, in some part of the Europe, we don't see the sunlight for several weeks or months. Sunlight is essential for vitamin D synthesis. Therefore, there's a mutation happened in SLC25A gene, which turned the skin color into lighter. Therefore, even with mild light, one can able to synthesize vitamin D. So that's one example. Second example, the amylase gene, which helped in digesting starch-rich food. That happened after the agriculture came into existence. We had multiple copies of that to efficiently digest that. The lactate persistent gene, after domestication of animals, started drinking the animal milk. Then there's a mutation which helped us in digesting the milk sugar efficiently. So all happened during the last 5,000 to 10,000 years, even less than that, 7,000 years. So that we can clearly see in one of the studies which we collaborated. We were part of that when studied the Europeans' ancient genome, which are of 7,000 to 8,000 year old. The lactate persistent gene, which the mutation which happened 5,000 years back, which is not there in that. Whereas the agriculture related one, the amylase gene mutation, was found there. So that actually the ancient DNA would help us in understanding what happened during the last 5 to 10,000 years. In that sense, which I forgot to mention about the Andamanese genome, if you have this, the cell lines, we can study genetically that how their genome, because they are not exposed to all kind of pathogen, they are in a very small environment, how their genome is just adapted to live in that environment, because we exposed to all pathogens, and even the mutation which causes the some of the cardiovascular diseases. One mutation which we studied, which is present in myosin binding protein C3 gene, which causes sudden cardiac arrest. When we looked at all over India, we found that mutation on average of 4% in most of the Indian population, but that's not there in the Andamanese. Yes. So because of two reasons. One, that mutation arose 33,000 years back because of the admixture got well spread. They are away from that. And even that mutation was there, those who carry the mutation must have died. But here in the city, we immediately take the people to hospital, make the people to survive, correct, and they live and pass on that to the next generation, right? But whereas in the adverse environmental condition where they don't get any modern medicine, they're adopted, their genome is adapted to live in that particular environment.
Most recently, Dr. Thangaraj, we've seen a massive pandemic caused by COVID-19 and the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And unprecedented number of people contracted it. It happened globally. Unprecedented number of people died because of it. As we go further, would the genetic diversity see an imprint of the COVID-19 pandemic on it in times to come?
Yes. Even if you see in general, India did much better.
Certainly.
Thanks to our doctors, scientists who have developed vaccine, and there are many groups who have helped in overcome.
Well, the Indian scientists worked day and night to help our population, and so did the government. Yes. And I credit the Prime Minister Narendra Modi government for giving us solutions for COVID-19 pandemic, and we managed, compared to many other countries, far better. But my question was, will it leave a genetic imprint on the human diversity?
Yeah, that's what I'm coming. So those who are exposed to, we can classify the population probably into three groups, for example. One, infected with virus, lead to very severe syndrome, who died. Other one, who infected, lived with the disease and come back. Third one, they infected, but they did not show the phenotype at all. Right? That means they are having much better immune system. Their genome is well, in the sense, adapted to live in a condition where so much of pathogens are existing, particularly SARS-CoV. Therefore, they did not show the phenotype at all. And who are exposed now with mild symptoms probably they also have much better
Immune system.
Genome, therefore they could adapt. So in the next time, even if they don't take vaccine, probably their genome would have got better inbuilt adapt system to take the challenge. So that way India is much better because we are exposed even earlier, because most of the population in India are living in the rural area who are exposed. If you look at several generations back, and the populations are living in the rural area without any medical facility, they would have exposed to that, and whosoever having much better immune system would have survived and the others would have not have been survived. So that means, so one way it is interesting to see the Indian populations who are exposed to those kind of adverse environment have a much better immune systems built in within their genome, have much better ability to overcome all of this.
Fascinating. Going forward, what do you think should be studied in human genetic diversity in India?
There are many things. First thing, the diversity, which you all know, that one of the interesting aspects of human population history. We have not well studied. Only now DBT has funded to study 10,000 human genome, which we are part of it, doing it. That again, it's a small number considering the diversity. Such study would help us in understanding various aspects. One is, of course, the similar population history. We can understand which of the populations are susceptible for some of the genetic diseases or infectious diseases. We can also look at some of the mutation which helps the therapy much better way in the pharmacologically important genes. Because whatever the drug which you consume, there are genes. If the gene has a mutation that would react differently to the drug. So all of this can be studied. So you must have heard about personalized therapy or personalized medicine. So this ultimately would help in giving much better treatment, not waiting until the person react to the drug. So we can, of course, that is already started in some of the diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and so on. So if any drug is developed, you can actually look at across the human population in India, see that how that particular drug, the human population, which of the population react adversely, so that we can avoid giving that drug to those population.
Now, is the human genetic diversity in India the most diverse in the world? We are a subcontinent. Many places, and like I said, the aboriginals have been wiped out. Is it really the most diverse, and the most beautiful diversity we have in the world?
Exactly. So you don't see anywhere in the world having such a huge, close to 5,000 human population. That tells, but not only that, obviously we don't have to actually study their genetics. The phenotype itself tells a story. So if you go to any Western countries or even if you go to China, so you see the people, everybody looks similar for us. But when you come to India, so every part of the country, the phenotype of the people are totally different. So that itself shows that how diverse we are.
So unity in diversity?
Absolutely, unity in diversity. That's why I told that if you look at the genetic analysis, we call as principal component analysis, every single population is unique, but they're all closely clustered, telling that we all have some kind of genetic affinities. So we're all connected genetically to some proportion of genetics.
You are very excited about this and understanding the wide diversity of Indian genetics, Indian human genetics is a fascinating subject. We can go on talking about this for hours together, and I know you can give me specific examples going into deep science. But for our lay audience, let us leave it at that, that there is beauty in India and the beauty is being preserved. That is the fascinating part. Thanks a lot for speaking to me, Dr. Thangaraj. Always a pleasure listening to you and learning from you. So that was Dr. K. Thangaraj telling us that the unity in diversity we see in India is unique. The human genetic diversity which we see in India is unparalleled today in the modern world. And that is what makes India a unique cauldron and a very unique country in the world. From Hyderabad, Pallav Bagla.